guys. So today we're going to start talking about the states of the Midwest. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share this with you. Make sure you're taking good notes. Most of what you need is highlighted in yellow, and we'll be watching a couple of short videos on some of these states. And you should have your Quizlet practice that you can do. There should be a link available for you, so you can start learning those states in the Midwest, and we'll go from there. So, all right, so the area we're talking about, Michigan. Okay, obviously here's Lake Michigan right here, okay? So we've got Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, okay, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota, okay? So good reference point for you. Colorado is right here just west of Kansas, okay? So Kansas and Nebraska. All right. Right, so resources of the Midwest. Natural resources found in America's Midwest include fertile soil, oil, coal, and limestone. Iron ore is another abundant natural resource found in the Midwest. Okay, so coal is actually a huge one. I visited Illinois a couple years ago and was surprised to find out that one of its major resources was coal. Coal mining was a big thing back into the early 1900s. Okay, mid 1900s. We kind of slowed our coal mining in those areas. If you go into like Indiana, Indianapolis, Indiana, and some of those outlying areas, you see a lot of strip mining in those areas. There are highways that go over huge mines that are really impressive. Kind of looks like going over if you're driving in the mountains and you look over a side of a mountain, right? That's kind of what it looks like when you're driving over these mines. So pretty impressive stuff. Despite the fact that the Midwest is filled with large major cities, such as Kansas City, Detroit, and Columbus, it is less populated than other major areas of the United States, and there are plenty of natural resources to be found on its landscape. Farmers take advantage of the natural resources, and most of the farming in the U.S. takes place in the Midwest. Okay, so you do have some major cities. We'll say that Chicago is definitely one of the most populated cities. Okay, but despite Chicago, all right, the Midwest is very spread out. It's sprawling land. You don't have huge concentrations of people in small areas. Okay, so lots of farming going on in these communities, lots of oil production, natural gas production, farming, ranching, all kinds of agriculture. Okay, much of the world's wheat, corn, and oats are grown in the Midwest. And because of this, the Midwest has earned the name America's breadbasket. Okay. So we talked before about the Mississippi River and how about 60% of the United States agriculture is still shipped down the Mississippi River. Well, that's where all this, all the farming and stuff, all the agriculture from the Midwest is what ends up going down the Mississippi River to be dispersed throughout the world. Okay. All right, early history of the Midwest. Okay, the French were the first Europeans to come into the Midwest states. Okay, the Europeans hunted for fur. Okay, the Europeans made coats and hats from the fur that they got. In 1673, a French priest and explorer named Jacques Marquette and a French Canadian named Louis Joliet explored the land in the Midwest. The purchase of the Louisiana Territory in 1803 led to American exploration of the area following Lewis and Clark's introduction to the region in 1804. Okay, so we're talking about the region of the Louisiana Purchase, right? And who did we purchase it from? France. Okay, so the French were the explorers that came into that region, claimed it, began to explore it, trappers and traders. But we also know that they were not real aware of how much land there actually was, and what kind of resources it had. They were still in the early stages of exploring that region, and really it hadn't been developed or anything. You didn't have major towns or cities in those areas. Okay, so in 1803, when Thomas Jefferson bought the Louisiana Territory, that's when Lewis and Clark went to explore. That's when we know people began to move into the region, and people were interested in developing those areas a little bit more. Okay. All right. By 1890, Chicago, Illinois had become the second largest city in the country. Okay, and the Midwest accounted for 29% of the country's manufacturing employment. Okay, Chicago, Illinois is located right off Lake Michigan. Okay, this is a major port for industry. Okay, importing and exporting of goods. This is on our basically our northern border, right? Border the Great Lakes. And Chicago was an area that was close enough to the Mississippi, other major metro areas. Had a lot of natural resources. As we said, there's a lot of mining up in that region. It just made sense for Chicago to develop into a major manufacturing city. So a huge percentage of people that were looking for jobs and looking to work in those industries lived in that area. Okay, still kind of true today. Chicago is one of our most populated cities. All right. The Great Plains, however, developed more slowly. Okay, westward migration tended to skip the plains, and people tended to head towards the west coast. Okay, why do you think that is? Well, because on the west coast we had the gold rush. Okay, so people started to head towards Oregon, California, Alaska, right? Okay, the plains were more of a farming region. People didn't know what other natural resources were there early on. So when people were looking to take their chances, they were looking more or less towards moving towards the west coast of the U.S. as it began to expand. Okay, it was not until the late 1800s, we're talking 1870s, 1880s, when most American Indians had been subjugated. Okay, go ahead and Google that for me. Subjugated. Okay, you can pause your video and look it up, right? What does subjugated mean? Railroads had moved into the area. We talked about the Transcontinental Railroad. Okay, and the plains experienced rapid settlement by farmers, ranchers, and tradesmen. Okay, so once that railroad had been established, okay, once we had the Homestead Act, people were able to move westward. They had the means to do it. They could do it more quickly with the railroad. It made sense for them to move westward. That's when the plains really began to develop. Okay, and a lot of that was agriculture, farming, and ranching. Okay, climate of the Midwest. Okay, the Midwest is similar to the Southeast in that summers are humid, although the winters are usually much colder than in the Southeast. Okay, so it's not unusual for some of those states, especially up in like Michigan, Illinois, Indiana. They get what we call the lake effect snow. Okay, states that border the Great Lakes get lake effect snow, which is basically that cold air that comes in off of the Great Lakes and accumulates all that moisture over the Great Lakes, and then it just dumps a lot of snow over those states in the wintertime. Okay, temperatures vary greatly from summer to winter, and appreciable precipitation year round. Average highs in the Midwestern states are around 85 degrees with lows around 15. Okay, so in some areas, highly populated areas like Chicago, you'll see where we'll get a big heat wave that comes through in the summer, and a lot of people aren't prepared for that, and it causes a lot of issues, health-related issues. People don't have air conditioning, things like that, because they're not used to super high temperatures, but they get up there. Okay, then in the wintertime, I've had people that I know that live in the region that your heat bill can go sky high in the wintertime because it's very cold, and you can actually pay more for your heat in the wintertime than you do for your house payment. Okay, so that's not unusual. All right, climate in the Midwest area is harder to forecast because there are no contributing oceans bordering these states. Okay, so what they watch when they watch the news forecast, they watch their radar, they kind of look at those storms and those systems that come in from the north, from the Great Lakes, okay, that come in from the east, the weather that comes in from the south. You get hurricanes and storms, tropical storms, okay, they usually sweep in to the states and go up the eastern coast. And everything from the west coast usually comes in from like Oregon, Washington area, and kind of sweeps into the east. So it's really hard for them to forecast and kind of understand exactly what the weather's going to do in the Midwest. Okay, so Kansas is kind of similar to Colorado, definitely much flatter though. They don't have the Rockies there, right? Nebraska is fairly flat. Get into those states, North and South Dakota. Okay, you don't hear a whole lot about North and South Dakota. Beautiful region. They've got what we call the Black Hills there. Definitely, they get a lot cooler winters. And warm summers there. Okay, but when you get into those states that border those Great Lakes, you definitely get some very drastic changes in weather, and people have to be prepared for that. So, climate is a big thing in the Midwest. Climate dictates growing seasons for farmers, right? It definitely impacts ranchers, and it definitely impacts industry because weather changing can impact how you import and export goods. So weather is a big thing in the Midwest. All right. So that's going to do it for today, guys. Make sure you wrote some good notes. If you need to go back, if I moved a little too quickly, then you can go back, pause, and take some better notes. But hopefully, you guys are getting a good start on this. Make sure you're practicing your Quizlet for your Midwest states. And if you haven't done maps yet, then we'll be doing maps. I'll talk to you soon.